Water closed over the deck with a muffled roar, but no cries of terror echoed from within the sinking hull. There, secured to heavy wooden beams, a bronze mechanism continued its relentless work. It knew no fear of the ship destruction, heard no desperate prayers of doomed sailors, and remembered no names of the craftsmen who had shaped its parts. Cold metal simply meshed with cold metal, transmitting motion from a central axle to a complex array of interlocking wheels. Each gear tracked the unseen paths of celestial bodies, calculated tidal rhythms, and foretold the precise moments when Earth's shadow would swallow the moon. This was far more than a navigational aid. It was celestial harmony captured in an alloy of copper and tin, ticking away in the dark while the world above fell into chaos. The vessel struck the submerged cliffs of the Antikythera Strait in the 2nd century before the Common Era, yet the device survived the violent impact. Wooden bulkheads splintered, valuable cargo scattered across the rocky seabed, and the heavy casing sank slowly into the silty gloom. Around it settled shattered wine amphorae, tarnished bronze coins, and fragments of marble statuary, but the mechanism remained completely untouched. It continued to measure time in absolute stillness, far beyond the reach of sunlight. Decades turned to centuries, empires rose and crumbled, libraries burned, and entire cultures vanished from maps, while the bronze discs kept turning, charting the exact positions of the stars in the dark. The ocean guarded it carefully, preserving it as a sealed capsule of forgotten knowledge. Millennia later, cold deep-water currents gradually reshaped the seabed. Layers of sand and calcified shell deposits slowly exposed the edge of a heavily encrusted hull, and that precise moment became a turning point in human understanding. A diver, descending into the depths in search of ancient riches, reached toward a dark silhouette. His fingers traced not a piece of ballast stone, but a complex geometric arrangement of corroded plates. It seemed the fossilized metal still held the warmth of the hands that had forged the impossible. None of the crew suspected that touching this rusted mass would pry open a door to a lost age. Hauling it to the surface required hours of careful labor, but comprehending its significance would demand decades of relentless study. Once the accumulated crust of ages was carefully removed under controlled laboratory conditions, researchers stood frozen before the radiographic scans. 30 bronze wheels of varying sizes interlocked into a single kinematic chain, obeying the laws of celestial mechanics that Western science would not rediscover for another 14 centuries. Every component had been fashioned with meticulous precision, every tooth aligned with its neighbor to eliminate the slightest friction. The apparatus accounted for the irregularities of the lunar orbit, predicted solar eclipses with startling accuracy, tracked the years of great athletic festivals, and marked agricultural cycles across the Mediterranean. Such mechanical sophistication vanished from human practice, leaving a profound void in the recorded history of technological advancement. The span of lost time defied easy explanation and challenged the accepted linear narrative of civilizational progress. Who crafted these gears in an age of wooden ships and iron blades, and whose identity dissolved into the sands of antiquity without a single surviving record? Scholars combed through fragmented philosophical manuscripts, cross-referenced astronomical observations with accounts of mathematical academies, and found only silence. Knowledge had not been lost in a single catastrophe. It had been systematically erased, methodically buried like a dangerous flame capable of consuming established order. The mechanism became more than an archaeological curiosity. It stood as a quiet indictment of collective memory, waiting to prove that genius could outpace its era, yet remain vulnerable to human neglect. The ascent to the surface transformed a shapeless lump of marine corrosion into the central enigma of modern archaeology. The heavy casing, hidden for decades in the cold abyss, proved to be far more than mere cargo. It was an encrypted message from an era long dismissed as primitive. Laboratory tables received the artifact as a silent witness to forgotten craftsmanship. Spectral scanners and tomographs slowly peeled back layers of frozen time, revealing an internal architecture that left researchers breathless. What initially appeared as a random accumulation of debris evolved into irrefutable proof of extraordinary engineering genius. Each new image raised more questions, blurring the boundary between myth and scientific reality. Corrosion had failed to erase the core truth, merely concealing it temporarily. X-ray beams penetrated the thick crust of oxidation, exposing an internal structure invisible to the naked eye. 30 bronze wheels of varying sizes interlocked into a single kinematic chain, transmitting motion with mathematical precision. Every gear bore the marks of manual labor by craftsmen whose names had long dissolved into the sea. The teeth were aligned with jeweler-like accuracy, eliminating the slightest play or unnecessary friction. The metal retained the memory of tempering, drilling, and polishing performed centuries before the invention of modern machinery. The device did not merely rotate, it thought in alloy, translating celestial cycles into a comprehensible mechanical language. The functionality of the apparatus extended far beyond simple navigation or seasonal calendar tracking. The mechanism accounted for the irregularity of the lunar orbital path, compensating for elliptical trajectories through a complex system of eccentrics. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance, marked 4-year cycles of grand athletic contests, and synchronized agricultural seasons with the phases of nocturnal luminaries. The rotation of the main axis established a rhythm akin to the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. Ancient engineers managed to enclose a working model of the universe within a compact casing. The precision of its calculations matched the data of modern astrophysics. Such mechanical sophistication vanished without a trace from human practice for an entire millennium. Only in the 14th century did European clockmakers begin assembling massive tower mechanisms, entirely unaware that they were replicating another culture's achievements. Their weight-driven escapements and gear trains appeared as a technological breakthrough, yet in reality represented a slow return to a forgotten standard. The temporal gap yawned like a black hole, swallowing all conventional theories about linear technological progress. The history of science fractured under the weight of those bronze components. Humanity had walked through a valley of oblivion. Who forged these components in an age of wooden triremes and iron weapons, and whose name survived on not a single papyrus scroll? Scholars sifted through the archives of the Alexandrian library, searched for references in the works of Sicilian geometers and Rhodian astronomers, yet found only fragmented hints.
The energy converges.
The knowledge did not vanish overnight, it was deliberately erased or lost in the vortex of wars and political upheavals. Priests and philosophers likely perceived the precise prediction of celestial events as a direct threat to their influence over the masses. If storms obeyed mathematical formulas, the authority of mystical aura would crumble. The temporal divide remained a silent indictment hurled at the face of contemporary civilization. Each reconstructed fragment whispered of a greatness that could have altered the course of history, yet lay buried beneath layers of indifference. Laboratory models came alive, gears engaged, and the ancient computer began counting off lost eras.
The images are coming to life.
Researchers watched the rotating bronze rings with a sense of reverent dread. They understood that they had uncovered not merely an artifact, but a mirror reflecting the fragility of human knowledge. Progress demands constant vigilance. The mechanism waited for its moment to remind the world of the true cost of forgetting. The search for truth led through endless labyrinths of dusty archives, where centuries of grime concealed fragments of ancient papyri and yellowed pages of philosophical treatises. Researchers methodically sifted through tiny fragments, cross-referencing astronomical calculations with scattered mentions of forgotten schools of geometers in Sicily and sun-drenched groves.
This confirms the theory.
Every discovered line seemed like a thread leading to the answer, yet the path always ended in a closed loop. The name of the great Archimedes surfaced in manuscripts more often than any other, yet even his surviving works contained not a single schematic of differential gears or complex kinematic arrangements. It appeared as though the creators of the mechanism had deliberately erased their own footprints, leaving behind only a silent bronze imprint whose origins remained shrouded in a veil of silence and fear. It grew increasingly clear that this unique knowledge had not vanished overnight due to some natural catastrophe. It was dismantled slowly, methodically, and deliberately, as if taming a dangerous fire capable of burning down the foundations of the established order at any moment. Generations of scribes replaced intricate technical terminology with vague allegories, while librarians hid scrolls containing engineering blueprints in remote storage rooms, where they gradually turned to dust. Civilization did not merely lose the craft of forging and calculating, it severed that part of itself, deeming it excessive or perilous. The memory of exact science was pushed aside by myths, until reality and legend became irreversibly intertwined, leaving only faint echoes in folk traditions. Priests, rulers, and guardians of ancient traditions understood perfectly well the hidden threat embedded in a precise comprehension of celestial mechanics. When the movement of heavenly bodies obeys strict mathematical laws, the power of mystical authority begins to erode without resistance. If a solar eclipse can be predicted decades in advance, it ceases to be a sign of divine wrath or an omen of punishment. If planets follow calculated orbits, then human destiny loses its sacred exclusivity and becomes merely another cog in a soulless cosmic machine. Such knowledge stripped the elite of their monopoly on interpreting the will of higher powers, reducing priests to mere observers and rulers to blind executors of an unyielding cycle devoid of higher purpose. The bronze device ceased to be merely a navigational or calendrical tool, transforming into a quiet threat to the very foundations of societal structure. It was not simply abandoned, it was systematically concealed from the public eye and passed down only within narrow circles of the initiated, until even those circles fractured under the weight of political intrigue. Masters who held the secrets of precise casting and gear ratio calculations were either exiled or forced to apply their skills exclusively to the creation of siege engines or instruments of torture. Genius capable of reading the language of the stars was forcibly reforged into a weapon of destruction, while pure blueprints retreated underground, awaiting a moment that would never arrive. Wars that consumed empires one after another completed the work of oblivion. Fires in temples of knowledge, the plundering of sanctuaries, and the flight of scholars from burning ships severed the final thread of continuity. The mechanism, resting in the hold of a sunken vessel, became the last witness to an era that had dared to measure the heavens. The ocean embraced it not as a trophy, but as an archive sealed in salt and silence. Humanity stepped into darkness, leaving behind the light of precise calculation, and only centuries later did cold waves wash ashore a reminder of how easily everything crafted by genius and preserved by generations can be lost. Modern researchers were left only to gather the shattered pieces of a lost mosaic, realizing that progress had never been a straight line ascending toward summits. It was a spiral, constantly returning to the same junctures where knowledge meets fear, and reason clashes with dogma. The bronze gears, silent on the ocean floor, now spoke loudly of the price of intellectual freedom. They reminded the world that the most dangerous force resides not in weapons, but in an idea capable of reshaping perception. And until humanity learns to safeguard its discoveries from internal self-destruction, the ancient mechanism will remain not merely an artifact, but an eternal warning whose lessons have yet to be learned. Modern digital reconstructions brought the ancient metal back to life in the cold glow of monitors. Engineers and historians painstakingly assembled a virtual mosaic from lost fragments, recreating the complex rotation of axles and the flawless engagement of gear wheels. Each new calculation should have sparked triumph, yet instead, a heavy unease grew within the laboratory walls. Algorithms confirmed not merely the remarkable precision of ancient craftsmen, but something far more unsettling. The device did not merely track celestial cycles. It recorded profound patterns of decline and flourishing, linking the positions of distant luminaries to sudden surges and catastrophic collapses of human culture through an invisible thread. The mathematical precision was frightening in its ruthless objectivity. The bronze gears relentlessly demonstrated that civilizations never advance along a straight line, climbing endlessly toward peaks of wisdom. Their trajectory resembled a closed spiral, where each turn inevitably returned society to the same trials. Ancient engineers reached summits of understanding, built magnificent cities, and unraveled the laws of nature, only for their legacy to crumble into dust. After every collapse, only scattered fragments, faded inscriptions, and vague legends passed down by word of mouth remain. Knowledge accumulated over centuries, then was mercilessly consumed by the fires of war and fanaticism, only to be painstakingly rediscovered from scratch generations later, entirely unaware of forgotten predecessors. It gradually became clear that the mysterious apparatus was never intended as a mere textbook or navigational reference. It served as a silent mirror, reflecting the harsh truth about the nature of human development. The inevitability of oblivion was inscribed within its mathematically calibrated rings, as though the ancient creators had known in advance that their achievements would not survive an age of chaos. The mechanism did not attempt to prevent catastrophe, it merely recorded its parameters, translating social upheavals into the language of astronomical cycles. Gear trains transformed abstract dread of the future into the tangible rotation of metal. This was no idle pastime for geometers, but a deliberate attempt to leave a testament for those who would arrive millennia later. Researchers watched the revived virtual schematics and realized with dread that they held not a symbol of boundless technological progress, but a physical embodiment of ancient existential fear. The creators of the device understood that human reason remains vulnerable to time, that collective memory is fragmented and riddled with gaps. They concealed their calculations within a bronze casing not for glory, but to preserve a single grain of truth in a world prone to self-destruction. Every gear, every eccentric, and every pointer carried a silent warning of how swiftly enlightenment yields to ignorance. The mechanism continued to tick within digital space, measuring not minutes, but entire epochs. Researchers began to notice disturbing correlations between historical records and the calculated cycles of the device. Periods of peak predictive accuracy aligned precisely with centuries of cultural flourishing, which inevitably gave way to prolonged eras of regression. The mechanism seemed to encode into metal the very breathing rhythm of history itself, where the inhalation of creation was always balanced by the exhalation of destruction. Modern algorithms confirmed that ancient astronomers possessed methods for forecasting social fluctuations, grounded in long-term observations of the natural world. They were not mystics, but pragmatists who had grasped the limits of human power. Their genius lay not in inventing complex gear trains, but in understanding that knowledge requires constant protection against the entropy of time. Laboratory reports bristled with dry terminology, yet behind every graph lay the drama of lost civilizations. The virtual model continued to rotate, demonstrating the flawless operation of a system whose creator had long faded into legend. Scholars felt the weight of responsibility,
Behold
realizing
the
that
cube of
decoding
wisdom.
the mechanism
Its
opened
light
not only
reveals
doors
the
to the
truths
past,
of old.
but held a mirror
Relive
to
the
the present.
knowledge.
If history truly moves in a spiral, then modern society stands on the very same turn where ancient engineers chose to seal away their knowledge. The device outpaced its era by a millennium, yet its core message remained urgently relevant. The bronze remained silent, but its mathematical logic resonated louder than any archaeological discovery, serving as a stark reminder of the price civilization pays for forgetting its own lessons. The final stage of meticulous assembly unveiled a secret concealed at the very heart of the ancient device. Beneath the multi-layered outer rings and primary drive wheels lay an additional drum, connected to the calendar cycle through an intricate chain of miniature pins. Its true purpose remained a mystery until researchers aligned every astronomical parameter into a single computational model. When algorithms finally matched the indicator shifts with ancient records, it became clear, the mechanism was never a simple navigational tool. It functioned as a complex forecasting array, requiring complete decryption. The construction astonished with its deliberate design, hiding a multi-tiered prediction system behind apparent simplicity, one that had no known parallels in recorded history. It did not foretell specific historical events, but measured a hidden rhythm of accumulating knowledge. The apparatus captured the precise moment when human intellect would reach a critical mass, sufficient to reignite long-dormant cultural cycles. The bronze plates carefully preserved the touch of craftsmen whose engineering perfection seemed entirely impossible for their era. Every component testified to a peak of development that modern science could only partially replicate after decades of painstaking research. The ancient builders understood that any technology inevitably circles back to its origins, creating an eternal loop of discovery and loss, permanently etched in solid metal. The virtual reconstruction gradually awakened on monitors, demonstrating a system whose logic extended far beyond classical mechanics. A delicate transmission chain carried rotation from the main axles to the concealed drum, which turned slowly, counting not years or decades, but entire epochs of cultural maturation. Every silent click of the locking mechanism corresponded to a sudden surge of scientific thought or a pivotal philosophical breakthrough. The creators perfectly understood the nature of accumulated experience, embedding not mere numbers into the alloy, but the very essence of human striving for order. They perceived the cosmos as a unified organism. They recognized that knowledge possessed an inertia resembling the motion of heavy celestial bodies. It accumulated gradually, reached a critical point of no return, and then inevitably triggered a profound transformation across all of society. The mechanism merely documented this pattern, translating abstract historical processes into tangible metal rotation. The synchronized movement of gears established a strict rhythm, inextricably linking earthly achievements with cosmic cycles. It reflected a deep understanding that civilizations operate by internal clocks, nearly impossible to alter through external interference. This connection stood as a silent testament to wisdom that survived centuries of oblivion. When the modern laboratory finally activated the complete physical model, assembled according to precise digital blueprints, a tense silence filled the spacious room. Indicator needles slowly began to move, overcoming centuries of temporal resistance, and finally rested on the mark corresponding to the present day. Outside the laboratory windows, neither earthquakes nor sudden solar flares occurred, nor did any other natural anomalies manifest. The air remained completely still, instruments registered no fluctuations, and the sky above the city was cloudless and clear, only amplifying the internal tension among the researchers. Yet it was precisely within this total absence of external catastrophe that a truly chilling horror resided. The pointers did not signal a physical apocalypse, they merely confirmed the conclusion of a vast intellectual cycle. Laboratory lamps flickered, casting long shadows, as if history itself watched in silent observation. Humanity had consciously stepped onto the very same turn of the historical spiral it had walked exactly 2,000 years ago. Technology had once again rapidly outpaced moral frameworks, while the relentless speed of data transmission long surpassed human comprehension, leaving society trapped in a state of information overload. Intellectual pride finally obscured all memory of past catastrophic declines. People were once again constructing fragile towers of information, blindly trusting in their own infallibility while ignoring ancient warnings. The device did not predict natural disasters, it marked the moment a civilization reaches the limits of self-awareness and begins severing ties with fundamental truths. Digital currents completely replaced genuine human interaction, and the illusion of total control masked the growing fragility of social bonds. The mechanism continued measuring an invisible deadline, showing how society repeated the errors of distant ancestors while blind to the exhaustion of its own progress. Bronze components rotated silently within the protected space of the laboratory stand, reflecting the cold glow of modern instruments. Their quietness sounded louder than any dramatic warnings, demanding neither shouts nor ominous portents. It simply stated a dry fact, recorded in mathematically flawless calculations. Scholars gazed at the halted indicators, realizing that decryption had become a merciless mirror for modernity. Every gear and hidden drum carried the centuries-old caution of ancient masters who knew the true cost of progress without wisdom. History rhymed with terrifying precision, reminding all of the eternal cyclical nature of human error. Unraveling the device purpose revealed not a new horizon of knowledge, but a profound existential boundary. The ancient engineers left no ready-made salvation manual, they merely erected a beacon marking a dangerous bend on the path of development. Modern algorithms confirmed that the critical mass of information had already been reached, and society balanced on a razor edge. Technological power once again clashed with spiritual immaturity. The rotation of bronze wheels completed its cycle, leaving behind not an answer, but a heavy question about the future. The mechanism outpaced its own era by a full millennium. It stood ready to emphasize, at the precise required moment, that knowledge without responsibility transforms into a destructive force. The silence in the laboratory became a deafening echo, impossible to look away from. The device guarded a centuries-old truth, prepared to repeat itself unless humanity found the strength to break the closed loop. The spiral of development continued its motion, awaiting merely another turn of history. The bronze remained silent, yet its mathematical logic resonated far louder than any archaeological discovery, serving as a stark reminder of the price civilization pays for ignoring its own hard-earned lessons. The creators of the ancient device did not make a single mathematical error in their calculations. They possessed a unique gift of foresight that extended far beyond the horizon available to them, and they clearly understood a simple yet unyielding truth. Knowledge stripped of moral foundation and profound worldly wisdom inevitably transforms into a blind, destructive force. That was precisely why they did not merely hide the mechanism from prying eyes, but sealed it within the ocean abyss. They guarded their creation not from contemporary enemies or political rivals, but from distant posterity. Their sincere hope was that future generations would only retrieve the artifact from the depths at the exact moment they attained sufficient spiritual maturity. Their goal was to pass the torch only to those ready to bear the heavy responsibility for a power capable of permanently altering the face of the world. Yet fate intervened differently, and the future found its discovery far too early, failing to pass through the necessary stages of moral maturation. The bronze gears, silent in the icy darkness for millennia, finally completed their long and arduous revolution. Their movement aligned perfectly with a modern era that genuinely considered itself enlightened and infallible. Researchers proudly declared humanity triumph over nature, while methodically repeating the very same mistakes. The ancient apparatus silently recorded this troubling pattern, confirming that technical perfection by no means guarantees moral progress. Every turn of the axle only emphasized the illusion of human omnipotence and the fragility of the systems they built. Completing this heavy historical cycle required absolutely no grand natural catastrophe or sudden intervention from beyond. The universe needed only simple human arrogance to trigger the process of inevitable self-destruction. It proved enough for people to once again take pride in their own achievements and confidently believe in their unique exceptionalism. Every generation considered its knowledge absolute, ignoring warnings from the past. They swiftly forgot how terrifyingly easily great empires collapse, how rapidly entire cultures are wiped from the earth, and how swiftly ash buries priceless repositories of knowledge. The mechanism required no loud alarms, as the mere existence of such delusions already served as a silent verdict. The cycle closed quietly and imperceptibly, like the exhale of an exhausted giant. The ancient apparatus never predicted an apocalypse in the conventional sense of the word. It promised neither fiery rain nor icy silence. It ruthlessly exposed the nakedness of a civilization that considered itself the rightful master of the planet, while remaining a slave to its own uncontrolled passions. And it was precisely within this chilling realization that a genuine, all-pervading horror resided. Scholars hunched over restoration tables suddenly grasped a terrifying and irreversible truth. Halting the rotation of the gears proved physically and metaphysically impossible, since they were driven not by a steel spring, but by the very nature of human vanity. The bronze wheels continued their slow, steady turn under the bright laboratory lamps, measuring entirely different quantities. The silence in the room felt heavy, as if the air itself thickened under the weight of unspoken thoughts. They tracked not calendar years, not decades, and not even centuries, but the slow maturation of a biological species that had once again found itself on the brink of its own oblivion. Every click of the mechanism sounded like a quiet alarm bell, reminding all that progress demands constant humility and a willingness to learn from the mistakes of predecessors. Researchers watched the rotating model with a profound sense of inevitability, understanding they had uncovered not a treasure, but a stern mirror. It reflected not the grandeur of the past, but the vulnerability of the present. History forgives no oblivion and accepts no justifications rooted in intellectual pride. The mechanism continued its operation within an absolute vacuum of human indifference, reminding everyone that each era receives precisely the mirror it deserves. The bronze held its silence, yet its relentless rotation echoed louder than any cries for help. The cycle concluded, leaving behind only a faint resonance within the laboratory walls, where scientists finally grasped the true cost of their blindness. The turning continued by sheer inertia, requiring neither fuel nor interference, merely confirming an ancient truth. Humanity stood once again at a crossroads, where the choice between creation and destruction depended entirely on the ability to restrain its own arrogance. The ancient masters left no survival manuals, they merely gifted a tool for self-reflection, cast in metal and verified by mathematics. As the gears continued their endless run, a heavy understanding took root in the researchers' minds. The future was not predetermined by the stars, it depended solely on the willingness to see its reflection in the bronze disk and finally step aside, breaking the centuries-old loop.